President Trump recommends paper ballots and other major voter reforms to the states. Pop quiz. How did President Trump win the 2024 election? Considering that the 2020 election was stolen and considering that they were going to try harder to defeat him in 2024, they were going to work for even more voter fraud than they were able to accomplish the first time. Why did he win? And the answer to that question is they gave up. They abandoned ship. There was no need to stick their necks out and risk getting caught if they were not going to be able to overcome the margin. In other words, what he was saying long before the election and what he attributed to his victory after the election, he and MAGA were able to accomplish too big to fail. Which means that chances are, as close as the election allegedly was, which it wasn't very close at all, but we know that there was at least some shenanigans. There were people that were engaged in voter fraud that was happening long before the election, long before the Democrats knew with a certainty that they were going to lose. Long before that, there was already mail-in ballot fraud. There was already plenty of voter fraud that was initiated before they gave up. Once election night came along and once they started seeing those early results and once they realized, hey, there's no reason for us to engage at all in this because we're going to lose, why stick our necks out? That's why President Trump was able to win every single swing state. He won all of the states he was supposed to win, plus every single swing state. Kamala Harris was an abysmal failure, and I would argue that she didn't even come as close as she allegedly did. This is why, and to be clear, for anybody who thinks, oh, I'm not sure if there was massive widespread voter fraud in 2020, compare the numbers, okay? Compare the numbers that Joe Biden got compared to the numbers that Kamala Harris got. Compare the numbers that Joe Biden got after the fact, coincidentally in all the swing states, to the numbers that Kamala Harris didn't get after the fact because they knew that they couldn't overcome President Trump's margin of victory. The reason I'm bringing all this up, because you all already know that, the reason I bring this up is that it's important to understand that nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. We're still faced with the same types, the same forms of voter fraud that are going to plague the 2026 election. They're also going to plague the 2028 election. Why? Because if we don't get it fixed before the 2026 election, we're not going to be able to get it fixed legislatively before the 2028 election because they're going to steal the 2026 election. They're going to take control of the House or the Senate or both, they being the Democrats. So we have 2 years to get the reforms in place, and it's a tricky situation because the reforms have to be initiated by the states. This is why it's the responsibility of state legislators and governors, and of course the people, us, those of us who live in the states, to demand that our state legislators and our state governors do what we want them to do when it comes to voter integrity. President Trump, speaking to a group of governors earlier today, reiterated many of the things we want to change, and he's specifically focused on paper ballots, noting that the cost of going to high-quality, high-tech, watermarked, not reproducible paper ballots would be about 8% of what they're paying right now for the very vulnerable, very cheatable digital versions of ballots that they're using today.
One other thing, I just before we leave, I think you should do this. For my safety and security and for the good of our nation, you should do it anyway, regardless, even if it costs 10 times more, but it actually costs you just a tiny fraction. If you went to paper ballots and you're voting, and I would hope that every Republican would. So it costs exactly 8% of what the machines cost. These machines, they got something going. They get business. It's amazing. So paper ballots, and paper is very sophisticated today. It's called watermark. It's impossible to copy, impossible to cheat. It's actually hard to believe that a piece of paper is highly sophisticated, but it's watermark, and it's it's amazing, actually, when you see it. You can't cheat. But if you went to paper ballots and same-day voting, and if you went to voter ID And also, one other thing, you want a proof of citizenship. Those four things: proof of citizenship, voter ID, paper ballots, one-day voting. And if you went to two-day voting or three-day voting, but some of these states, you had 64 days. You know, California just finished up just a short while ago. They were voting a week and a half ago. They're trying to finish them up. And other states, too. They were weeks after the election. I mean, if that were a close election, you'd have to wait for weeks and weeks and weeks. You got finished fast, Brian. Thank you for your help. We did very well in Georgia. That was very nice. But some of these states, if you had a close election, you wouldn't know who won. And then, you know, once that happens, then you really never know who won. But you would save tens of millions of dollars. Forgetting about right, wrong, and security, safety, our country, our Constitution, and all of this. Number one, you'd have a much safer election. Number two, everybody, you'd know the results of your election by 10 o'clock. Everybody, it's a beautiful system. It's boxes of 5,000, boom, boom. And you can go and examine each box. It's so simple and so good. I did ask Elon, because he knows more about computers than anybody I know. I said, what do you think of the voting system? He said, computers are not meant for voting. It's just not it's too many transactions taking place too quickly. It's just not, he said, honestly, and I've gone to the best people, the smartest computer minds from MIT, from others. My uncle was a professor for 41 years at MIT, and a brilliant guy, and I got to know a lot of the people up there. And they will tell you that the most secure way that you can secure the election, and probably the fastest way, because there can be very little hanky-panky, is paper ballots. Can you believe it? So I hope, Sarah, that certainly the Republican governors, but if you want to save a lot of money, you go to paper ballots. It'll cost you 8% of what the costs are now. And that's based on a good deal for machines. And then when you go through the days and weeks and months of waiting, France had mail-in ballots. Anytime you have mail-in ballots, you're going to have fraud, without question. And France had it, and they went back to paper ballots. And I saw their election, and their election was over at 9 o'clock, and their numbers came in at 10:05. And there were no complaints. They had a winner, they had a loser, 39 million votes, and it was done. We're one of the only people that has now mail-in voting, one of the only countries that has mail-in voting.
All right, that's it. I mean, what else needs to be said? Well, of course, more needs to be said. Senator Mike Lee from the state of Utah took to X to lay out exactly what President Trump said, except in a much shorter version. He says paper ballots, same-day voting, photo IDs, proof of citizenship to register. Who's on board with this? And then Elon Musk, quote, posted the Mike Lee's post saying 100%. And yeah, I mean, there you go. Okay? Voting would be more accurate. Okay? It would be easier for the voters themselves. You might say, "Well, what about isn't mail-in ballots easier?" Well, not necessarily. Okay? I mean, sure, does it save you a potential trip? Sure. Are you sure that your vote went in, got counted, didn't get dumped in some woods somewhere, as we've seen on multiple occasions over the past few elections? No, you have no idea. You have no idea. Okay, so is it, I mean, it's one of those things where, sure, you can buy the gas station sushi if you want, because it's more convenient, but do you really want to eat gas station sushi when you can just go the few blocks more and get actual sushi from an actual sushi restaurant, a Japanese restaurant? Of course you don't want to get gas station sushi. And that's what mail-in balloting is to me. Now, there are going to be times, I'm not saying eliminate mail-in balloting altogether. There are going to be people who need exceptions. Members of the military serving abroad, people who are just incapable, unable, physically unable to get to the ballot box. Great, we need mail-in balloting for certain people, but not ubiquitous, not across the board. That's ludicrous, and that's a recipe for disaster. What about photo ID? Duh. I'd mentioned earlier, in an earlier segment, I was talking about the various things that the vast majority of Americans agree with, issues. And it seems that they agree with us conservatives, just common sense people, not even conservatives, just make sense, right? They want corruption ended. They want the border secure and the criminal illegal aliens deported. And yes, of course, they want men to be not competing in women's sports. But this is another one. Voter ID, photo ID presented, makes sense. You have to present your ID to do just about anything. Why would you not need your ID for voting? And the idea that it's somehow going to suppress the vote of minorities, particularly African Americans, that's the most racist concept I've ever heard of. Seriously. I mean, we hear a lot of racist things from Democrats on a regular basis, but that one, to me, is the most blatantly racist. When you have these people like Stacey Abrams, who, that's her big thing. It's like, oh my gosh, voter ID will suppress the vote. Yes, but there was the most voters, more voters voted against you than literally any other candidate in history. Are you sure that the vote got suppressed? It's like, yes, there would have been more and I would have won or whatever. I don't even know what that criminal talks about half the time. But so many of them have come out and said it's racist to have voter ID because black people don't have IDs. And then so I forgot who it was. Some journalist went to the streets and just started asking literally as many people as he could, "Hey, do you have an ID? Yes. Or do you know anybody?" Speaking to black people, do you know anybody who doesn't have an ID? They're like, no, everybody's got an ID. Yeah, exactly. Do you know where the polling place is? Yes, of course. Can you get there? Yes. Okay. I mean, anecdotally, we can understand how racist that is to say that black people will be suppressed if you make them put out their voter ID or their ID in order to vote. It's just the dumbest thing. And then of course proof of citizenship, that is the most no-brainer thing I've ever heard of. And just the sheer fact that the uniparty swamp Democrats in particular are still pushing for the idea that anybody can vote. They don't have to be U.S. citizens. Just blows my mind, the stupidity. But then you have to think about it and you realize, well, when you look at their policies and you look at the sentiment of the American people, the only way that they could possibly retain power at all is to cheat. So when they push for digital, machine balloting and multi-week voting windows and no voter IDs and no proof of citizenship, you realize, it's not that they're trying to be fair. It's that they have no other possible way of winning. Former CIA analyst Jim Rickards has built a reputation over the decades, really, of being able to read the writing on the wall and make determinations, make predictions. Some of them are going to be right around the corner, others are going to be further down the road, but either way, he's usually right. It's very uncanny how good he is at this stuff, his latest analysis, which you can find for yourself at jdrucker.com/crisis, jdrucker.com/crisis. His latest analysis surrounds President Trump's tariffs. Now, they have been, in my humble opinion, wildly successful so far. They've been able to make certain things happen that I think a lot of people didn't think were possible. And of course, they have a dramatic potential revenue generating effect for the United States of America. But with that said, there are certain risks, certain challenges, and it's not just going to come from China or Canada or Mexico or Colombia or wherever. According to Rickards, he thinks that the biggest threat sits right in the heart of New York City. Crazy stuff. And he thinks that there are things that we need to do as American citizens to prepare because things are already in motion. According to Rickards, this next major event, which will happen, according to his prediction, between now and April 11th, 2025, something that we should pay attention to. So go and check out his latest prediction, jdrucker.com/crisis. See if there's something there for you to gain from and to potentially prepare for, because the world is changing. For us, it seems as if it's changing very much for the better. But there are going to be certain challenges, certain risks. And I think being prepared for those challenges, being prepared for those risks, that's the difference between thriving or just making it by.